Most people don't notice it, but there's a subtle habit shaping so many of our relationships today: the constant urge to explain ourselves. At first, it seems polite, even considerate. We justify our choices, our moods, our absences, hoping others will understand. But underneath this lies something deeper, a wound. When you feel the need to constantly explain who you are, what you feel, or why you act a certain way, it often means you're not standing fully in yourself. It's like saying, "I only exist if others approve of my existence." This comes from early environments where feelings were dismissed, where a child heard, "You're exaggerating, don't be so sensitive, that doesn't matter." Over time, that message becomes an invisible prison. You start living for other people's understanding instead of your own truth. And here's the paradox. The more you try to control how others see you, the further you drift from your own center. Life becomes a performance where the audience matters more than the actor. Carl Jung called this a barrier to individuation, the journey of becoming fully yourself. Breaking free begins when you stop over-explaining and start trusting your own authority. Because in the end, you don't need permission to exist. You just need the courage to stand in your own being. A human being only truly becomes themselves when they no longer feel the need to constantly explain who they are. Because the truth is harsh. As long as you're trapped in compulsive explanations, you are not free. Every justification is a subtle way of saying, "I can only exist if you allow me." This pattern doesn't come from politeness. It comes from a wound formed early when as children we were told our feelings were wrong, exaggerated, dramatic, or inconvenient. Slowly we learned, what I feel is not valid unless others approve it. So we carry this into adulthood, justifying every emotion, every choice, as if we need a convincing argument to exist. But behind that lies the loss of internal authority. Instead of trusting our own truth, we rely on the gaze of others to confirm it. And that is submission, not freedom. But here's the breakthrough. The moment you stop over-explaining, the psyche straightens. You reclaim the posture of inner authority. Life changes. This is more than a habit, it's a doorway, a chance to step out of the prison of validation and into the space where your being needs no permission. So if this message resonates with you, stay with me, subscribe, because what we're exploring here isn't just psychology, it's the path back to yourself. Most people don't see it, but self-esteem isn't built from within. It's built from the reflection in the eyes of others. And this doesn't happen consciously. Those trapped in this pattern rarely notice it. They just keep explaining themselves, why they feel a certain way, why they chose a certain path, why they acted a certain way. But behind every explanation hides a fear. The fear of being rejected, simply for being who they are. Carl Jung pointed out that at some point in life, every person must confront this inherited structure. Until then, they live through the values and judgments of others, parents, teachers, authority figures, becoming a reflection of approval instead of an expression of truth. Compulsive explanation, then, is not just politeness, it's self-abandonment. It's diluting your truth so it's easier for others to swallow. The healing begins the moment you realize you don't need permission to exist. Your emotions, no matter how messy or contradictory, don't need justification to be real. But here's the challenge. When you finally stop justifying yourself, the silence that follows feels unsettling. It reveals a gap, the missing inner authority that was never allowed to grow. This is what Jung meant when he spoke about individuation, building internal authority. Because once you have that, you no longer need to explain.
You no longer need to beg for validation. You simply stand in yourself. In the next part, we'll dive deeper into what it means to develop this authority and why it's the key to breaking the cycle of self-explanation. So if this resonates with you, subscribe now, because what we're exploring here isn't just psychology, it's the path to reclaiming your own being. Carl Jung understood something powerful. Every time you shape your words to avoid displeasing someone, hide your emotions for the sake of harmony, or suppress your choices to escape judgment, you're not just keeping the peace, you're distancing yourself from yourself. This isn't a dramatic rupture, it's subtle. It happens in small, everyday moments. When you laugh at a joke you don't find funny just to fit in. When you say yes while your whole being screams no. When you call your sadness just being tired, so you don't feel like a burden. When you cover anger with cold logic, afraid of seeming immature. Each time, a small part of your truth gets left behind. Jung saw this as the ego becoming disconnected from the self. Instead of being the conscious center of who we are, the ego turns into a servant, reshaping itself to win approval. And the more it adapts to what others want, the less it can hear its own voice. The result? Doubt replaces inner confidence. Intuition is silenced. Authentic feelings are mistrusted. And the tragedy is, society rewards this. People who adjust easily, who never rock the boat, who always explain themselves, are called good, polite, easygoing. But beneath that false harmony, there's often exhaustion. The quiet exhaustion of someone who lives for others, but no longer knows how to live for themselves. Carl Jung taught that when the ego drifts too far from the self, the true center of our wholeness, neurosis appears. Anxiety, emptiness, chronic doubt, the slow erosion of self-esteem. These aren't random symptoms. They are the soul whispering, then screaming, "See me, hear me," after being silenced in the name of fitting in. At the core lies one question: whose life are you really living? As long as your choices exist only for approval, your life will remain a performance. You'll always be a character in someone else's story, never the author of your own. The way out is reclaiming internal authority, the ability to uphold your truth even when it isn't understood, even when it causes discomfort, even when it disappoints others. This is the beginning of individuation, the journey of becoming whole. Internal authority is the opposite of compulsive explanation. Instead of negotiating every feeling just to be accepted, you stand in the quiet conviction that your truth needs no justification. And when that shift happens, everything changes. The psyche moves its center of gravity from the fragile edges of external approval back to the grounded center of the self. But this isn't easy. It demands courage, because the moment you stop explaining yourself, you come face to face with the raw fears: rejection, judgment, exclusion. Jung called this the desert of inner solitude. It's that moment when you hold a no without guilt, when you change direction and feel no need to explain why. That is when silence stops being absence and becomes affirmation. Imagine the freedom of ending a conversation without explaining why. Not out of arrogance, but simply because you owe nothing to anyone to exist. Developing this kind of authority doesn't mean shutting down or being insensitive. It means you no longer beg for understanding. You offer your truth as a gift, not as a plea for acceptance. Communication shifts. It stops being performance and becomes expression. The difference between speaking to be approved and speaking to be true. Internal authority shows up in small moments. The silence you hold in the face of provocation. The strength of saying, "That doesn't resonate with me," without explaining why. The refusal to play emotional games that demand endless justifications. And most of all, the courage to be misunderstood and still remain whole.
Jung believed this was one of the most important points in the psychological journey, when you stop outsourcing your self-worth and recognize it as something born from within. This is a symbolic moment, the death of the old self that lived to please, and the birth of a new self, rooted, autonomous, whole. But here's the truth. Not everyone will welcome this change. Silence grounded in authority disturbs people. Those who fed on your insecurity lose their grip. Manipulators feel threatened. Relationships built on control begin to collapse. And that's why, when you stop explaining yourself, everything changes. In the next part, we'll explore why silence carries such power, and what happens to your relationships when you stop justifying who you are.